we were in negotiations investing in real estate.
They're winning, they're making
What's
money.
up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Estate Educators Podcast, where we provide the education you can build on. I am your host, Kevin Amolsch. We are back. This podcast is so much fun. We are helping real estate investors and real estate educators. So if you're out there buying properties, fixing and flipping, developing, building a portfolio, or if you're providing content to investors, this is the podcast for you. I have a very cool guest. We just met, Paul. You and I just met, was that last week? Just recently. And man, we hit it off. I really enjoyed that conversation. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast. I know that you're a fix and flipper in Denver, a prolific one at that. And you've really been good at scaling the company and the business. And I think that's what you want to talk about today is how do you go from a little fix and flip here and there to really scaling up? So welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here with you, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I know you had an interesting start to your day. Probably talk about that too, because I know it's on your mind, but let's back up to the beginning. What got you excited or even interested in fixing and flipping in Denver?
Wow. I'll give you the condensed version, I suppose, of how I got started in this space. I came from a corporate sales background. I'm an engineer by trade. And like a lot of folks, they get out of college and they get a job, right? So I had a good job for a long time. I was traveling. It was in my 20s. I really enjoyed learning how to become a professional salesman. That word salesman almost has a negative connotation to it. I always saw it as a way to really add value to the organizations I was working with. And one of the organizations I was doing a lot of business with at the time was United Airlines. COVID hit and just crushed my spirits and my dreams of all the big projects we'd been working on for years, and it just kind of fell apart. And so, I was reading the books and listening to all the podcasts, and I'm like, hey, there's something to this real estate thing. I had been sort of buying properties one at a time every year or two for several years before that. So, the whole idea of buying a house, living in it for a year or two, moving and turning that into a rental, it works. And it probably still works really well now. Worked a hell of a lot better back when interest rates were, 2.8% or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyways, I got my start into real estate that way, used that kind of experience with United and COVID as a way to say, let's use this as a chance to springboard into real estate. I got into wholesaling for a long time, kind of beat my head against a wall for years trying to figure out how to make that business work. For all you wholesalers out there, it's not easy to do that. I mean, nothing in real estate, frankly, is easy. It's more about, I think, finding your game and like what you do better than anybody else. That eventually led me to flipping. And I think it was mostly because I understood as an engineer, maybe the construction side of it, learning to manage these processes, learning to manage that. And frankly, you kind of just got to pick your poison at a certain point, right? I'd rather deal with contractors than distressed sellers, maybe is a way to say that. So that's how I got into flipping. And boy, the mistakes that have been made over the last 3 to 4 years, we could probably, write a book on it, as I'm sure you could too. But we've failed forward and we've gotten to where we are today because we've approached it with a continuous improvement mindset. We've gotten better every single time. And now we're doing, 3, 4, 5 flips at a time and focusing on a more luxury type market, because that's where we found our skill set and our niche really to be.
So at the very beginning, you were consuming the books and the podcasts and all of that. Then you bought a property, you lived in it, moved out and kept it as a rental. So that was your first property, I assume?
Yep. And, I think I didn't do it the way, how do I say this? I wasn't reading the books before I started buying a couple houses. I think I was joking around with you the other, last week, because the first house I ever bought was basically because my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, was like, I'm tired of coming over to this, basically frat house. And when you got 3 roommates, it's like, well, it's time for you to get your own place. So I don't know. I found my way into real estate mostly because of that. And, and then you just start figuring things out. You realize, wow, so you're telling me if I buy another house, I can stick a tenant in that old house and ran it out. And, I didn't even know what cash flow was at the time, right? So it just started. And again, for like a lot of people, you kind of get addicted to it.
Oh
It's
yeah.
this concept that like, wow, you can take control of your life. You can get, this elusive word of passive income and financial freedom. It's not unachievable. It's absolutely doable, right? And so it just started one house at a time. 1 year at a time. We'd buy another house. You earn 500, 600. A lot of my properties were $1,000 a month in cash flow. We started buying, Airbnbs, and all of a sudden, by the time I left my job, I think I had like 5 or 6 grand a month in cash flow from just buying primary residences and converting them into rentals.
Do you still have all those?
I sold one of them. These are all pieces on a chessboard, right? I think everybody thinks their intention is you're going to buy these houses, you'll keep them forever. Well, that's not how it worked for me. Sometimes you got to sacrifice the pawn in order to, move
Yeah.
the things around. So there was points in my career where I needed cash to keep these businesses going. So we would, I sold a house or two, and we sold a couple of them. So yeah, I've got, I guess, 3 properties now that are spread out across Colorado. And in Colorado, you don't need dozens of properties to have a nice couple $1 million portfolio, right? So we are fortunate in our market that it's more of an appreciation market. Of course, we don't buy for appreciation, but it's just, the last however many years, 20 years, Colorado's seen 4% in appreciation, year over year over year. And so all these houses that I bought in 2017, 2018 have now appreciated, a couple $100,000 in each of them, and, added equity. And that's way more than the cash flow that I've earned. Let's just say that.
Yeah, cash flow is king, and you do a good job of that with your flips. And I know you've really stepped that up. Townhome developments, luxury flips. So I'm going to get into all of that. Um, but something I've been looking at a lot, Paul, is like return on equity. And I think
Yeah.
this is a piece that a lot of investors miss.
Mhm.
Like your cash flowing, you said up to $1,000 per house, which is phenomenal. But I mean, how much equity was tied up into that property to get that $1,000 a month? And if you were to extract that equity, maybe through a sell, what could you do with the money? Is that sort of the analysis that you went through when deciding which properties, or how did you decide which ones and
Yeah.
when and why and all of that?
ROE is such an interesting metric that I
It's
do.
elusive. People don't understand it.
It is so elusive, and I'm going through that right now. Maybe I need to talk with you about a HELOC, because I've got a house that's, I bought it in 2018. I bought it for 565. It's easily worth, 775, maybe 800. And that loan's gotten paid down over time.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here looking at, like, as I'm going out trying to raise more money for my deals, it's like, you've got almost 300 grand tied up into that house, right? Now I only lived there for a year and a half, so I can't, I could sell it, of course, but now I got to pay gains on that. And it's like, well, why would I want to sell it? My mortgage is $2,800. I can rent that thing for 38,000, 3,800 a month, 4,000 a month. It's a brand new townhome in West Colfax. Why would I sell it? So I'll just go borrow against it. We'll go get a line of credit against that. Because the return on my equity there is much lower than what I could get investing it back into my other businesses. So ROE in a way helps you kind of put things on an apples to apples playing field, right? Yeah, $1,000 a month sounds great, but relative to what? Right? That's the thing with ROE. It's like, yes, that's great. It sounds really good to say that on a podcast, and I'm actually getting a much lower return than I could get had I, taken that equity and invested it somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty well accepted across the industry that real estate values are not going to be shooting up like they have been the last several years. I mean, I think it's pretty much going to stay flat. I think most economists are agreeing with that. So, like you said at the very beginning of this podcast, you're not buying for appreciation anyway. So, really, we're looking at the cash flow.
Yeah.
And I just find it interesting. You could invest, like someone could come and invest in one of your projects or invest in a fund like we manage for a much higher return than what's stuck in their equity. And I think it's just one matrix that I just wanted to get your opinion on, because that's how I look at it. Other people will say, well, would you buy that townhome that you're looking at right now? Would you buy that townhome for 800 grand and keep it as a rental? And if not, then maybe it's time to sell. When it switches to would you buy it at
Yeah.
that price, then that's just another way to look at it. But I don't know. I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent. I want
I
to hear
agree
more
with
about
you.
your.
So we have a phrase that it's a framework I learned from a mentor of mine. And he calls the investor frame. So it's like glasses that you need to put on, because oftentimes we can get clouded by all these other things. And so the investor frame basically says, well, knowing what you know now, would you choose to buy that house back at that current price? Right? Okay, the house is worth 800. If I gave you the same amount of equity and the same amount of money, would you buy that house back at the same price? And if you wouldn't, then I would say you're violating the investor frame, which says, well, your money is probably best served somewhere else. And so it's maybe a way of saying it is like ROE is really, and we are going down a rabbit hole here. It's just like it's like a human thing. We get sort of attached to the decisions that we make. That rental property at one point in time maybe was a great deal.
Yeah.
And knowing what we know now today, if you wouldn't buy it back, then it's probably not a good use of the equity that's tied up in it.
Yeah.
I see this all the time with people in their own businesses, right? Knowing what you know now, maybe that business you started was not isn't the best idea now, and at the time it could have been. Doesn't mean that what was is. And so yeah, that just goes into, I think, the psyche of an investor, which is like, you can't get attached to these properties. These are pawns on a chessboard, right? If the ultimate game that we're trying to win is how to get the life that we want on our terms and on our timeline, then we have to be willing to change our mind. And that speaks directly to the ROE conversation I think you're touching on there.
Yeah. What I'm hearing when I'm listening to you, what I'm hearing is get the emotion out of the decisions.
Yeah.
The pawn on the chessboard, I'm gonna write that down. That to me is speaking to emotion.
Yeah. And if emotions are, again, easier said than done, right?
Oh,
As
totally.
humans, we are emotional. So you don't get to just like opt out of that. It's more like putting up, as I like to say, bumpers, so that you don't let those things influence your decisions, really any longer than they need to. You'd be lying if you said you didn't have an emotional attachment to that primary residence that I got married in, that eventually I moved out of, right? It's like, well, we want to keep that house forever. And it's also like, but what do you actually want? Do you want to have an attachment to this house, or do you want to get the life that you say you want with the least amount of risk and effort to get there? Well, if that's the case, then you got to be willing to change your mind.
Yeah, that's a great point you're making. Maybe you do want to keep a house for emotional reasons. That's just not the best financial decision, but it depends on what your goals are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we can understand the goals, that's such a great point. Okay, so I'm going to get into your business a little bit here. So you're fix and flipper, but you started with move out, keep it as a rental strategy, which, by the way, happens to be, in my opinion, the easiest way to become a real estate investor. Fixing and flipping is tough. You said wholesaling was tough. I agree. And so is fixing and flipping, as you know from your conversations this morning. But tell me about your very first fix and flip. How'd you find it? Real quick, approximate numbers. How did it go for you?
Okay. I found it because I was wholesaling and I decided to keep it. And gosh, it's almost like painful to relive this, because that first deal, I ended up partnering with a contractor who will remain nameless, because that's not my style, is to name people. But my point is I heard a lot of what I really wanted to hear. Right, I've flipped 1,000 homes. I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, however long. Right. And I was looking for someone that I could kind of just hand. It's not the right way to do business. I know this now, right? I wanted to defer the responsibility to somebody else so I could go back to building my business. And so we decided to, partner. Of course, there was nothing in writing. It was all just handshakes, because I was making all sorts of mistakes at the time, right? And so I was going to bring the deal, I was going to bring the money, and he was going to do the construction at cost, and we were going to split the profit on the end. And I unfortunately I started a second deal with this guy before the first one had finished. And it was actually the second deal that really got me. We got out of the first deal. I made like, I don't know, I think the deal made 50 grand. Not
That's good.
terrible, not terrible. It was much lower than we were expecting to make because it took longer and all these things. But of course, I didn't have any control over any of that because I, kind of gave that responsibility to him. And this was where I really, it just goes down to everything's hard. You just got to pick what you are best suited for. What's a light lift for a wholesaler happened to be a really heavy lift for me. What is a lighter lift for me in the construction space is a really heavy lift for other people. And so I don't know that I would say like, yeah, if you're going into real estate because you're trying to find the easiest route, what I would say is like what's easiest is what's best suited for you, your strengths, your understanding of the person that you're there to serve, and really how do you serve them the best way. So I guess what I would say is my first deal, I made, 25 grand, something like that. The second deal, I lost $175,000, Kevin. So it's like,
Holy cow.
if you don't go into this business taking it very seriously, you can get your teeth kicked in very fast. That deal, the second deal, we bought it in July of 2021, and I didn't sell it until December 2023. You have hard money. You guys do hard money, and you know how expensive that is for that 2.5 years where you're just bleeding out.
Yeah.
And it really like, I say this not as a way to maybe scare people into fix and flipping, as like, I guess what I would say is don't try to build, three businesses all at the same time, right? I was really just trying to do too many things. That's what got me. And, I was just really deferring the responsibility of that to somebody else. Maybe like hoping that he would just do the right thing and it would all just kind of go away. And, real estate's a tough business. People say what you want them to hear a lot of times. And I was just kind of naive. That's why I think how I would explain what I didn't do well is I took what people were telling me as like, oh, well, okay, I guess he's going to have that done this month. So, you just didn't verify it. But that's what happened with me on my first couple deals. Yeah.
Wow, we could really learn a lot from this, Paul, honestly. So I'm going to dig in just a little bit here. You 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 made a lot of mistakes. Sounds like. If you could narrow this down to just one, is it maybe not a contract with your contractor? Is it not visiting the site more often? Is it being too scared of a conflict? Like, can you narrow down like maybe one something that our listener can benefit from?
Sure. I mean, I would just say all the things that you just mentioned, right? First and foremost, if you're coming from a corporate background, which I was sitting at a conference table with vice presidents and directors and this type of thing. And the vetting process to get to that table in the first place is systemic, meaning like you don't really have to worry as much about is that guy going to do or girl going to do what he says they're going to
Yeah.
do or says, are they going to lie, steal, and cheat from you? It's a lot less likely. So if you're coming from that world, first of all, recognize that this is a jungle and you got to walk in with eyes wide open. There are things that will jump out and bite you. You cannot just trust everybody who says that they'll do what they'll do. And if you're a very trusting person, just recognize that's a weakness of you, right? It's not a strength in this business. So I think I had to develop a little bit of a callus to that. It's really great to hear all these great things. And also, if you don't get it in writing, if you don't have control over your deals, what I was kind of sharing with you at the beginning of this call is I had to fire some guys this morning. It's not fun. It just means like, that's part of the business. There's like your expectations of what you want. I see this all the time. Flippers they see these shows or they just see the rose colored glasses version of what it can be. And that's not how it is, right? So my first advice would be, yes, contractors, you need to control that deal with like, meaning I would highly advise against not partnering with somebody that you've never been in business with. I would make sure that you don't try to do 20 businesses at once. Like if you're wholesaling, get really good at that one thing. If you're trying to flip houses, get really good at that one thing. This is the mistake that I made, and I wish I could just reach through I don't know, I was going to say the screen, but I don't know, whatever it is that people are listening to this and shake people and say, it's going to take a lot of restraint. Restraint is a really key part of being successful as a real estate investor. You have to slow down. You have to slow down. It means get good at one thing. We hear this over and over and over again. And then what happens is we get in these deals, and then you're like, but I could also do this. I could make money if I was doing that. I could start buying rental properties. I could flip houses. Ooh, multifamily. That looks really exciting. Ooh, development. I want to do that. Maybe I'll go get my real estate license. What I would say is all those are totally valid. It takes a lot of restraint to stay focused on one thing until you can get that to work, and give yourself permission to change your mind. So like if you realize that wholesaling is not a good fit after a certain amount of time, it's okay to change your mind, but don't try to do them all at once.
Yeah. When people ask me for advice, or like, give me one, I'm on another podcast and I'll say, give me one piece of advice or something. I mean, my number two go-to is this: staying focused. So I 100% agree. The fox that, what do they say? The fox that chases two rabbits catches none, something like that.
Sure.
Yeah. And you've done a very good job with that. Because I know you're pretty much just doing development on townhomes and now luxury flips. So you've really narrowed your focus. Even as your career grows, you could expand your focus because you can get very good at one thing, and then it's easier to add, right? Become an expert and then add. You've done that, but instead of adding, you've narrowed. So tell me a little bit about what your business model is now.
I'll start by saying I think maybe this is the biggest lesson. And it's what's caused us to grow so quickly as a result of learning this one thing. And the biggest mistake I see investors making, same mistake I made, is you're looking at it as, how can I make money? Which strategy is going to make me more money with less effort and risk? And I'm not saying you shouldn't consider those things, but I think there needs to be something else in first position, which is service. Our business took off when we got crystal clear on who we serve better than anybody else. For us in the flipping and the development space, it was really two types of clients. The first is, let's talk about the fix and flip space. So I'm in my mid-30s. My wife and I we're married. We're thinking about a young family, right? We bought a couple houses, and we're thinking about buying that second or third house, really where we want to start a family. Guess what else? All of my other friends and colleagues, they are in that same place in life. Mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s. That is the people that I know better than anything else. You know what I know about them? They need at least 2,000 square foot. They have to have a 4-bed, 3-bath. 3 beds isn't going to do. They have to have a bedroom right next to their primary because they're not going to put their 2-year-old down in the basement. They need a fenced-in yard. They need 2-car garage. They want an open kitchen. They're willing to pay for a certain quality. And all of them are wanting to be in certain neighborhoods that they probably couldn't afford when they were in their late 20s. I could write a book about my ideal client. This is the problem I see with investing, is people don't know who they are serving better than anybody else. And so we got so narrowly focused on that buyer. What are they looking for? Where are they looking to buy? What type of product are they trying to get? And we started doing that. And we had a strategic advantage there. Why? Because we are those buyers. I see a lot of mistakes. Let me give you maybe an opposite to consider. I get a lot of wholesalers that I know that are younger than me. A lot of them are in their early mid-20s. They see these $50,000 checks that other people, these gurus, are cashing, and they think, well, I could make a bunch of money doing this. Guess who your client is when you're wholesaling? Typically, it's an older person, someone typically in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They're going through a distressful time in their life. Now, I'm not saying a 25-year-old can't understand those things. What I'm saying is most don't. Most don't take the time to really understand who they're serving and how to craft their product around what those people are wanting. And so to get back to my fix and flip business, there's a reason why I don't buy under 750 ARV. There's a reason why I don't buy under $100,000 rehab. Why? Because the types of products that my buyer is looking for, you just can't do that. They are willing to pay more for a higher quality product in a nicer neighborhood. So instead of getting like, well, where can I make the most money? Or where do I have the least amount of risk? We just got clear on who do we serve the best and got really, really good every single day at serving that client. And so people ask me, how do you scale your business? I would say, stop trying to scale your business. Start getting better at what you do every single day, and your business will explode as a result of that. So it's like, I think what I've learned, I'm not trying to suggest that if you're at level 1 in business, that's totally okay. Level 1 is about sometimes going out and just doing a bunch of stuff. It's what they say, take action. What I know about myself is I don't struggle taking action. I think a lot of the people that get into real estate do it because they actually don't really struggle with that. If you do struggle with that, what I would say is take that advice and go take action. That's what level 1 is about. It's about saying yes. Level 2 is about saying no. It's about getting clear that like I could probably do a million things, but there's only one thing that I do better than most everybody else in this market. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I'd say we're pretty good at serving our client, the client we know really well. And if you can get really good at that and you can stay focused on that, and your goal is to get better every single day and not how do I scale, your business will grow at a rate you probably wouldn't imagine could have happened.
Wow. Master class in marketing there. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I know something that you're really big. You have a very strong opinion, let's say, Paul, is having great people around you. Like you can't really scale or grow or profit very much without the right group, without the right sphere, I guess. So you went out and created your own. Like I don't really know what to do here. I don't have the right people that I'm working with, so I'm going to create it. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing to help other investors, and then how it ended up impacting you by working with them.
Yeah. This is something I've come to know to be true. My experience tells me this. This is not something I've read in a book, although there are lots of books written about it. Real estate is a team sport, and it's all about relationships, period. End of discussion. We've all probably heard, Dr. Ben Hardy's book, Who Not How. My experience is it couldn't be more appropriate for real estate. All the best deals are done in a small circle. All the best contractors are known by the other best contractors. The private lenders who fund most of my deals don't care about the deal. They are investing in me. It's a relationship business. And if you can operate in such a way where that is truth, so we have I'm sure this isn't a new term, but there's a phrase I like to use called relationship capital, right? And if you think about money as a capital source, or your time as a form of capital, well, your relationships are also a form of capital. So the quality of your relationships, as that grows, the more people that are stepping towards you, the more value you add, the more your relationship capital will grow. So we just decided to optimize for that. I'm an engineer. I don't know if you can hear that through the way
Yes.
I talk. But when we started designing all of our businesses, including this group that I run, optimizing not for, cost of acquisition or how long, what's our rate of attrition or what is, yada, yada, yada. It's like, no. Forget about all that. If we believe this to be true and we choose to operate our business in a way that just optimizes for relationship capital, let's just see what happens. I'm not sure anybody else, well, I shouldn't say that to be true, but we decided to make that our thesis of our business and our investment. And so what that meant was, I think people confuse this. They're like, oh, relationships. That just means I just go to a bunch of meetups, right? And I would say, well, I would say, yes, that is true at the beginning. You do have to just go out and meet people. And so it's one of these things where the answer is always it depends. Yes, it depends. Well, if you're at a certain level in phase of your career, then yes, it means go to the meetups and just meet the people. At a certain level, that's not how business is done. Business is done through value and creating relationships with people. So our group that I run now is just in a very intentional group of people who are operators, people who source deals, and people who fund deals. As I like to say, there's always a deal triangle. Doesn't matter whether you're fix and flipping or you're doing a commercial multifamily. It really doesn't matter. There's always three components: who's sourcing it, who's funding it, and who's operating it. And real estate is done inside of that triangle, and that's where the team sport lives. So what we do in this community is we just create an environment where those three sides, you know, the wholesalers, the agents, the salespeople, the business development reps, they're great at sourcing opportunities, right? The builders, the flippers, the developers, this type of stuff, the property managers, those are all operators. A lot of times they are really good. That happens to be their sweet spot. And you obviously understand the third side. This is where you've chosen to build your entire business around your sweet spot, which is funding, financing, things like this, right? And so when those three sides can really create a very dynamic and coming to that from a place of, let's say, receivership, it's not how do we, it's being very open to what that collaboration might look like. Your relationship capital goes through the roof because again, I'll just come back to because real estate is a team sport, and that's how we've been able to move into bigger opportunities, development deals, things like this, is not by trying to figure out how do I underwrite a duplex project or an 18-unit project in this neighborhood. It's like, I didn't know how to do that. I found the guys that needed what I brought to the equation. So that's been my experience with real estate and how to do bigger and better deals each year. And that's the real focus and goal of the group that I run.
This episode is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is a private lender specializing in short-term rehab lending to real estate investors. Got a property that needs some love? We can help. We are able to offer funding solutions because we raise private money from individual investors. With more than 15 years of experience, Pine offers passive investors an alternative that provides stability, consistency, and security to your portfolio. If you like real estate but want to avoid the ups and downs and effort, a Pine mortgage fund could be a perfect fit for you. Accredited investors will experience an 8% preferred return and profit sharing. Diversify your portfolio out of Wall Street and into Main Street with a Pine Financial Group mortgage fund. Get more information at pinefinancialgroup.com. That's pinefinancialgroup.com. Yeah, no, that's great. And I couldn't agree more. The relationship is so much more than a meetup. I mean, do you know their kids' names? Do you know their anniversary? Those are the types of things that you know about your friends, and the people do business with friends. So I think the goal there is to actually build a relationship, not just a high five and handshaking at the meetup.
And what I would also add is that if you're going to take that approach, it takes a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time. I mean, of course, right? It's like the guy, I use this example when I talk about this to my team. It's like the guy who goes to the bar that's trying to pick up the girl and hey, should we get out of here? It's like, hey, that's not how it works, you have to build these relationships. You have to go into them with no expectations of what can I gain from this, and more like, how can I add value to these people in my life? It's a position of service, and it comes back to that every single time. If you're coming to this with transactional based, what am I getting out of this? How much money am I going to make on this deal? I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm saying it's not as effective as a long-term relationship-based approach.
100% agree. All right. So this group, you guys do some events and that kind of thing. How do we find out more? Are you even taking new people into the group? I should have asked that first.
We do. It's a very private group, because I will say, and you probably know this, not everybody sees real estate the way I'm describing it. Maybe you resonate with what I'm saying. But in practice, not a whole lot of people do this because it's harder initially, right? So if you guys want to learn more about it, we have, I guess I'm trying to remember the actual link. So it's realestatecertainty.com/event. So we've got, there should be probably 60, 65, 70. I say real estate professionals. I've been told sometimes that comes across as like, sounds like a real estate agents. We have a very diverse group of people all across the country because there's just a million ways to do real estate. So if you are a lender, a flipper, a property manager, a wholesaler, if you are a professional and an entrepreneur in this space and you are interested in growing your business in the way that I've just described, you can go to realestatecertainty.com/event. We have some pretty incredible speakers. In fact, it's one of the guys who's going to be there. He's been a mentor to me for the last few years. He has coached some of the top business owners, and athletes. He's an Olympian. He's helped 40 Olympians win gold medals. I'm a sports guy, so I resonate with him and his approach to entrepreneurship with a lens through sports. So we do a lot of breakouts to really try to create an environment where if you're trying to go from, my whole thing is not trying to go and do a massive volume-based business, because it's really hard to do that through relationships. Guarantee you have that challenge as a lender, right? Because if you're going to spend time with relationships, well, you have to spend time doing it, right? So there's just a certain trade-off that comes with that. Usually the trade-off is in volume. So our whole point is to try to figure out where the sweet spot for each person is. Is that 12 deals a year? Is that 25 deals a year? It depends, right? It always depends. And so when we can figure out what that is, instead of going from 20 deals a year to 40 deals a year to 80 deals the next year and 160 after that, like there's diminishing return to that. So we figure out how to go to bigger and better deals each and every year. And that's the point of the group. We create intentional breakouts and information and speakers to kind of curate that. I was able to do that from, let's just say, the fix and flip in the development space. And we have guys and girls in really every aspect of real estate trying to do this. So if that's your thing, you can find us at that link, realestatecertainty.com/event, or you can find me on social media. I talk about it all the time. I'm at Paul Sparks Official on Instagram. So that's how you can learn more about it.
That's awesome. And we're going to put all that in the show notes. So that's great. Thank you for that. All right. We have to wrap up here. But what I'm going to do here, Paul, is go through my notes. I took some notes while you were dropping those golden nuggets on us. And then I just would ask that you listen. And then if I miss anything that you think our listeners should know, just fill in the gap.
Perfect.
All right. So we started off you saying the key to being successful in this business, and it's probably any business, is your game. So that was your words, your game. And then I actually wrote down a little bit later on that it says right here, pick what you what is suited for you. Pick what is suited for you. So we talked a lot today about focus and staying inside your lane and doing what you're both enjoy and what are good at. And that's how you're going to really scale. I know you don't really love that word scale, but so that was my word, not yours. Take control of your life. This is one thing that real estate will provide for you. So one of the reasons you and I both love this business is for that. Don't get attached to houses. It's like a pawn. Your houses are like a pawn on a chessboard. So we discussed how that's basically removing emotion. Stay focused. This is a jungle. So if you're coming from the corporate world, keep your eyes open. And trust is actually a weakness, you said. Be careful with partners. Slow down, have restraint. That's really the key to success. Focus on service. And you gave us a masterclass on that, which I really loved. Level 1 is taking action. So it's saying yes. Level 2 in your business is say no. So if you're struggling with taking action, you're still at level 1. Go out there and start making some mistakes and then get to level 2 where you could start narrowing down. It's a team sport. Relationships are huge. And then the triangle you described for us, sourcing deals, funding deals, and operating the deals. All right. How'd I do?
Great, man. I can't believe we talked about that much. And
I did a lot, right?
I have a lot to say, Kevin. I don't know,
Yeah, it was great. I really took a lot out of this one. And I know for the listener, I know you took a lot out of it too. I don't know how you couldn't, because Paul did such a great job of enlightening us. So if you did, please give us a 5-star review and share this with a friend. But one last thing here, Paul, give me final piece of advice for the listener.
If you're interested in being in real estate for the long term, and I would suggest that would be the case if you're trying to do this, right, is recognize that this whole business is a team sport. It's about relationships and finding your sweet spot. If you're newer in this business, or maybe you've been in it for a long time, but you're still not sure where that comes from, it's from a place of service, right? Approach this less from the numbers and more from who am I best positioned to serve in this market. If you can get clear on those things, your business will explode. I can promise you that.
I love it, man. And so for you listeners, especially if you're in Denver, but anywhere, because your group is all over the nation, reach out to Paul, man. He gave you the contact information. We'll put it up in the show notes. Definitely reach out to him. And Paul, we really appreciate you coming on, man. I know you had a little rough morning, part of the business, but I know it's not fun. And you still made it on today. So thank you for the last 45 minutes of your time. And then for the listener, thank you for your time. I know you could be listening to many other podcasts, and you chose to tune into this one with Paul and I, and we really do appreciate that. So with that, if you did enjoy it, 5-star review, share with a friend, and I hope you make this day a great one. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please be sure to follow and leave us a review. Oh yeah, and tell a friend.